Good evening, everyone, and welcome everybody who's watching us to our weekly podcast, the San Joaquin Tribune weekly podcast. And I'm your host, Raj Singh, and I have Gurtejit Falma as a co-host. Well, I should say he's actually a host and I'm the co-host because you see him more often than me. And I'm such a honor and it's just so exciting for me today that we have our county's district attorney, Tori, with us. So welcome, Tori, to our show, and it's our pleasure and it's our honor to having this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. This is a wonderful opportunity.
No, thank you, Tori. We all know who you are, but please share your professional and personal journey with us.
Well, thank you. I've had the great honor of being the district attorney since 2015. So I'm going into my 8th year, which I can't even believe is occurring. But it has been a wonderful journey. San Joaquin County is the best county in the state of California because it has the best people in it. They never give up. They're hardworking and they're dedicated and they're committed to making a change. And I've been so grateful to be a part of that journey. And what's interesting about the district attorney's office is we represent all 780,000 people in the county. The chiefs have their city. The sheriff has patrol jurisdiction over the county jurisdiction. He has the jail that houses everybody in the county. But my organization is the only one that represents everybody in every aspect of it. So we not only are responsible for public safety as the chief law enforcement officer, I'm also responsible for the healing of our communities. So what we say is 50% is public safety and 50% is healing. Because if our victims are not healed from the trauma and the harm that they received, then we're not doing our job. And those who commit that harm, if they're not held accountable, then we're not doing our job. So we constantly are working with both of those. And I'm proud to say when I inherited the office back at the beginning of 2015, we had about 198 people working. We quadrupled our victim services because we felt that we needed to have more opportunities to engage more advocates in the courtroom, and we're capable now of working with law enforcement. Our advocates are on the street, out on patrol till midnight every night, co-responding with law enforcement, giving notification if there's been a death or a suicide, assisting victims of rape or child abuse, sexual assault or domestic violence or elder abuse. And they literally are there for the victims on the scene. And then they'll meet them at the hospital. They'll go with them throughout the journey, and they'll stay with them throughout the entire court proceeding. We also realized that we needed to build a family justice center, and I'm proud to be the founding DA of the first ever family justice center in San Joaquin County. That provides wraparound services to all of our victims. Whether you make a crime report or not, we want to help. So we have Child Abuse Prevention Council, Women's Center, CRLA. We have human trafficking counselors. We have our own school, our own department store, if you will, our own grocery store. So if you come in, we can give you literally the clothes to put on your back, backpacks, hygiene, shoes. We can give you laptops, computers. We have a classroom. We have groceries that we can give you to keep you afloat, and we have access to housing. And I hope in the near future, we're going to build our first ever housing project for women and children that have been victims of domestic violence and child abuse. So keep your fingers crossed that we get that grant, but we're working on it because we know that we have to be able to take care of people and get them well and get them healthy. And on the other side is the prosecution. And so we uphold the Constitution of the state of California and the Constitution of the state of United States of America. And we have to enforce the law. So what we do is we make sure that those who are creating harm in our community are held accountable and they receive the appropriate solution. And we also saw a whole nother level come into our office. Traditionally, people who committed harm were the responsibility of law enforcement and the prosecution. Law enforcement does an investigation and an arrest if it's warranted, and then forwards the report to the prosecution. My office then reviews that report, makes a determination if there's sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt a crime occurred. If so, it proceeds to prelim, jury trial, or it might plea. That, is what people traditionally think of us when murder, rape, robbery, homicides, things like that, people associate my office with. But I also am in charge of the air, the water, and the soil. I am the environmental guardian of San Joaquin County. So we have an entire environmental division that works on air, water, and soil. Consumer fraud. If you buy a bag of chips and there's this much chip, but the bag's this big and the rest is filled of air, that's consumer fraud because you didn't buy air. You bought potato chips. So we do consumer fraud, take on major corporations, Walmart, Costco, Amazon, you name it. We've gone up against big, well-funded legal teams to ensure the safety and well-being. Insurance fraud, workman's comp fraud, welfare fraud, all of those types of cases we do as well. So we have a civil and a criminal division, plus we handle our appellate issues that move up through the district court and to the Supreme Court. So we have a wide spread of responsibility to ensure the safety, the health, and the wellness of our community. But also what we do drives the economy. Because if people feel safe and people feel empowered and they're going to work and they're buying products and buying homes, and we get home ownership and things like of this nature, people feel safer, they invest in our communities, and it becomes a safer and healthier place. So that's it. I know it seems like a lot, but I could go on for an hours about all the great work we do. And I'm so grateful to the 300 people that work in my office day in and day out, building every day a better world and a better society. And I think what's so powerful about the 300 people in my office is they're not afraid to change. They're not afraid to look at what we've done in the past and seeing what works, but also seeing what hasn't worked and create that change to ensure equality, fairness, and justice is equal for all.
No, thank you very much, Tori. I would say I have learned a lot about your department. So there were certain things that were not aware to me. I'm pretty sure many of us were not aware how robust your department is, and it has so many pieces that you work on in your day-to-day activity. So one thing you mentioned, so you work for, so there's a process for women and children. So especially this is an issue in minority communities. Somebody who is coming from a developing country to this country, they do not know what the process is. So if a woman or a child gets into that situation, whom they should first approach and what kinds of facilities they have currently, like they should be approaching some of the departments or some of the information they can get online, or they should be reporting to law enforcement. The other thing, my question around is because they do not know about the process, they don't have anywhere to live, because if they are doing just towards this direction, some situations are very drastic. In majority of those women and children, they don't report because they do not know what will happen to them. They will lose the house where they are living and what their future will be.
A great question. And you're exactly right. I come from grandparents and great grandparents that are immigrants. And when they came to this country, it is such an adjustment to make. Most people come because they've probably been traumatized in their own homeland. They don't want to leave their country, but there's a time and a place where you have no choice but to leave. And that's how my grandparents and great grandparents came here. So you come to America with this already in your heart. And then you have to adapt and change to the ways and often the language, the cultures, the history of how you adjust. So what we've been trying to do, and Suzanne Schultz, who runs our Family Justice Centers, and Gabrielle Harkey, who runs Victim Services, have done such an amazing job, is that we really work with our faith-based community. Because when you come here as an immigrant, the first thing you do, the first often thing you do is your community is faith-based. You go to your church, to your temple, to your synagogue. You go there because you're going to find people that speak your language, who know your traditions and understand. And it took us a little while to kind of visualize how we could do that. So we meet with the imams, we meet with the Sikhs, we meet with the Catholics and the Jews and everybody that we need to meet, Baptists, and we work with their faith-based community to say, okay, this is how we do it. This is how we process cases. Let us speak to your women's group. Let us speak to your men. Let us preach on Sundays for us, the importance of a healthy family. And some things can be solved with within that community. Not everything needs criminal justice, but the cases that do need criminal justice, we're here for you. And this is how it works. So if you are experiencing violence in the home or child abuse or sexual assault, you can reach out to your local law enforcement agency and make a report. And I highly recommend it. What's so difficult is family doesn't call the police on family. That's across every culture. And often by the time they call law enforcement, there's been a lot of abuse already that has gone unreported. And so there's a lot coming to the table. So what we ask people is to look at law enforcement as a partner in this journey with you, not just to be punitive or to cause any more harm or trauma, but as a source to help lift your family and get your family moving forward in whichever way it looks best for them. So you can contact law enforcement. You can also contact Child Abuse Prevention Council, Women's Center, the List Community Partnership of San Joaquin County. And you can go to your faith-based community and you can ask for assistance. And what they can do is provide counseling and services. And sometimes that's enough. You can also come to our Family Justice Center and we'll connect you with all of those services. We have daycare, we have food, clothing, shelter, housing, all of those things. Because sometimes when violence occurs, you're walking out the door literally with the clothes on your back and nothing else. And a lot of people go back, even though they know it's dangerous, they know it's violent because they don't have a place to go. So with the Family Justice Center and places like Dawn House and the shelters, we've been able to make those kind of connections where we can put men, women, and children, whoever they are, in a safe place so we can stabilize the relationships and get going forward on the criminal case. And that's so important because now we can attach services not only for our victims and their children, but we can also get programming to the defendants because they're still going to be the father or mother of those children. And so we need them to get better, whether it's in jail or in prison or out of custody, depending on what kind of a case it is, they have to get better. There is something wrong there. And to think that only punitive actions work doesn't. We have to do punitive with restorative justice programming because that person that caused the harm has to go back to the family and make amends, has to find some place to move forward. And so we really are working with finding and giving families that stabilization and prosecuting those who cause harm, absolutely, to the full extent of the law. If you're harming your own family, you're going to be held accountable, but we're also going to lift your family up. We're going to lift those victims up. We're going to get them housing to the best of our ability, clothing, food, counseling. We're going to get them back in school and we're going to get them back moving forward. And so I think it's so important. So depending on where you are in your journey, if you're just not getting along with your spouse, you can probably look to local counseling in your faith-based community to help. But if it involves any form of aggressive verbal and physical abuse, anything like that, you need to call 911 and make a report. And even though it seems hard to do when it's your own family, it's the right thing to do because now we can get services to you and your family and hopefully get you back on a healthy journey. And we really saw this with COVID, with so many, families living, multi-generations living together, not being able to go about the town, being isolated and creating that fear. We usually have, a couple homicides a year that are related to family violence. We had 15. So we have to be in the home and we have to be able to help people get well. And if you don't call us, we don't know. We don't know. And so make the call. And I guarantee you we'll do everything we can to help you get healthy and well.
Now, this is such a valuable and great information that we're all learning because the first thing in a lot of people's mind comes when we talk about law enforcement or prosecutors or lawyers, it's just about, hey, there's a crime and there's a case going on. It's going to be in front of a judge. No, that's not. It just stops here. They do way above and beyond other services like we just learned. There are so many different resources available for families to come and get help. So they are there to help you out. They are there to help the families out. And end of the day, but at the end of the day, you have to make that call in order to make your voice heard and get that help. So keep that in mind. Yeah.
It's a great point, Rush, because if you don't call, we don't know.
Right.
And as hard it is, and every family struggles with this. How do you call on a loved one? But if you don't call, things will not get, they most likely will not get better. And so if you
Right.
do call, we'll get you, we'll do everything we can to get you back on the pathway to success.
Right. And as you heard, the Tori did say that it's just not only calling the law enforcement, you could be calling the local councils. They can help you out. That could resolve that problem, and it doesn't need to end up going to the court or anything like that. But there are resources available through the San Joaquin County's District Attorney's Office, and they are overlooking everything, and they are there to help you out. So let's just kind of get the ball rolling, moving forward, learning a lot of good information. So overall, just a huge role that you're sitting in, and as we all just know about, just listening to it, there are tons of things that you're doing, there are tons of things you're involved in. So if somebody needs to know, what is the role of the district attorney? So how would you describe that?
That's a great question. I think what's so important is that our job is to ensure public safety. And what does that look like in America in 2022? It's a constant evolving situation. And I think probably the best example to use would be homeless. Most homeless are struggling with mental health and substance abuse, and then extreme poverty. Those are three areas that I, per se, in law enforcement, that's not really our lane. We're very good at dealing with individuals who are creating harm in our community, removing them and healing those victims that they've harmed and getting everybody moving forward. But what happened is homeless population continued to grow, and nobody knew what to do and nobody knew how to handle it. So they started calling 911 on the homeless. And I understand that. I totally understand that. But what happens when you arrest somebody? Okay. So what we were seeing is all of a sudden homeless in streets, sidewalks, things like of this nature. What do we do? How do we handle it? And people always say, just arrest them. Okay. Well, let me talk to you about arrest. Arrest occurs by law. You have 48 hours to bring you before a magistrate to be arraigned. Okay. So arrest is not a simple thing, nor is it an inexpensive thing to do. And so what happens is that officer has to have probable cause, as they say, PC, to arrest an individual based upon their belief that a crime occurred. That crime usually has to be of some sort of conduct that has to be something that's prohibited by the penal code section that says you cannot do this, you cannot commit this crime. That officer then has to make the report and has to arrest the individual and has to swear that the facts are true and correct and that this information in order to arrest this person. They also have to book all the property around the homeless person. So they have to take all of that stuff, put it into bags, tag it, and put a QRL on it, and then take it back to the police department to book it. And then take the person over to the county jail. Then the whole county jail system starts. And that includes clothing and searching and medical, physical, all of that has to occur over there. And then they house them. And it's about $100 to $165 a day, depending on the kind of housing you need out there. So you're talking about $1,500 to get you to arraignment, okay, in 48 hours. By the time we do all the work that needs to occur, that report then comes to the DA's office. We then decide if there's charges. I have charging deputies, and then they send it over to the court. The court has to generate a copy for the defense. The jail has to transport the inmates in. We have to push them through arraignment, and we give them notice of what the charges are. And then the judge, everybody thinks I do this, but the judge sets bail. I don't. We can make a bail recommendation, but the judge decides whether you stay in or out of custody. So when you look up, if you think when people always say, just go arrest everybody. Well, first of all, there's over 1,500 homeless people. There's only 1,440 beds at the county jail. So I would have to let out murderers, rapists, and child molesters to make room for trespassers. So that's not going to happen. The second thing is probably after the 48 hours, they're going to be released on their own recognizance, meaning they're going to be back in society. And guess what they're going to be? They're going to be homeless, mentally ill, and suffering from substance abuse. So we haven't made it any better, but I've spent a lot of money and not driven any results. So we had to say, time out here. What are we doing? What does this look like? Now, don't get me wrong. Nearly 10% of the cases I prosecuted last year involved the homeless. I prosecute the homeless who commit crimes, but the homeless who are ill who have diseases that are driving this poverty don't do better by coming into my system, by coming into the criminal justice system. And I could spend that money getting them into a healthier lifestyle, a health, substance recovery, mental health recovery, and hopefully housing. So we had to have the courage to say, what are we doing here? Well, then as that was going on, the Boise case came down. The state of Idaho, Boise decided to, the city of Boise to do a ordinance that prohibited camping on streets and sidewalks. And the court said you can't do it unless you have a no barrier shelter. It went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the second highest court in the land. And they said, absolutely not. You cannot do this unless you have a low barrier shelter. And then they petitioned for the United States Supreme Court. They declined to hear it. And once it's declined, that is the law of the land. So as of now, with the Boise decision, law enforcement cannot arrest individuals for parking, camping, loitering, grocery carts on the side on public space. Now, if they're on private property, if they're in your front yard, we can. But if they're on the sidewalk, we cannot. And so when people say, go arrest them, or why aren't you prosecuting them? Legally, we simply cannot do it without suffering millions and millions and millions of dollars of litigation. So what that meant is that as long as they're on public property, they can camp. As much as people are frustrated, and I am frustrated as anybody, but we cannot break the law. And so we have to adhere to it. So then we had to say, what are we going to do then? We've got to fix this problem. So we need more substance abuse programs. We need more residential programs. We need more institutions for the severely mentally ill. We absolutely do. People don't like to say that, but it doesn't do a severely mentally ill person well to be out living in the street in a tent and not getting services. They're going to only further deteriorate. And somebody has to have the courage to stand up and say it and make it happen. And we also have to find more housing that is affordable that people can live in. The housing in San Joaquin County is one, if not often, the fastest, highest growing rental rate and property rate in the state, and sometimes even in the United States. So there is no affordable housing left around, very limited. And we need to be able to accommodate that. Because if I arrested everybody that was homeless, I would let murderers out. I would have to let murderers out. I would have to let rapists and child molesters out. And I will never do that. I will never, ever do that. We have to keep our city safe. And I won't make them better. So what we want to do is figure out how we can do it. And we have to build those low barrier shelters. Now, Tracy's doing a great job. They're going to be coming up, I think, by early 23, with a low barrier shelter. Stockton's working on them. Lodi's working on them. Once that occurs, then we can go back and we can cite and arrest individuals and bring them in. And some people say that's cruel, and I understand what they're saying, but we have to do something to move people into programming. Because if you're not willing to do the work, then we're going to have to nudge you to do the work, because we're going to have to bring you in to address your mental health and your substance use. Now, that's not saying everybody out there is mentally ill and has substance. In the last 2 years, I, along with great people like Jill Antonini and Rima Barquette and Nancy Lamb and Allison, Ed Rodriguez, you name it, this group of volunteers comes together every week. And we've taken over 100 children off the street, 2,000 dogs, 400 cats, and 1 goat off the street, and placed them into safe housing. Because I couldn't sleep at night knowing there's children sleeping in those cars and in those spaces. It's cold, it's dangerous, and it's not the right place to be. We also have several hundred veterans out there. They gave their life for our country, and they suffered terrible consequences for it. I'm not leaving them out there. So we're working to house them every day. We're working on housing projects, and we're going to have quite a few coming up in this year. We also have Veterans Court. So I bring the veterans in, and we do wraparound services with them, because as Americans, we owe it to them for what they gave to this country and to this nation to keep us safe. So we never stop fighting for our veterans. We have Homeless Court, where we try to assist people to get their records cleaned up so that they can get housing assistance, because some of that is an old traffic ticket or something like that. We're going to work with them to get that cleaned up and get them into the housing that they can afford. And we have Mental Health Court. And that also allows us, sometimes we're in there daily with people, sometimes once a week, we're checking in with them and we're monitoring their mental health to move people forward. And that's where sometimes people think, and they tell me all the time, why don't you just arrest them, or you're not arresting them on purpose? I am arresting people that are homeless that commit crimes. But people that are ill, I'm trying to find a better way to take care of them, because we all have a family member that struggles with substance abuse, alcoholism, mental health, and even unhoused. Some of us have teenagers that couch surfing. Some of us who have seniors who, retirement has not lasted as long as they thought, and they're now living with you. That technically is an unhoused person or a homeless person. The difference is you had the capability of taking them in. But nobody taught us, how do we deal with substance abuse? How do we deal with alcoholism and mental health? And until we become a society that fully understands these diseases and how to tackle them, incarcerating individuals for being ill isn't what the criminal justice system was for. The criminal justice system was for those who commit harm. So we really focus our resources, our money, and our efforts on finding those who are committing the harm and removing them from society, and then focusing on those who are simply sick and helping them to find a healthy way forward.
No, thank you, Tori. Yeah, no, with this kind of information, I would say that now we, as well as our audience, have more exposure. They know more about what the district attorney's role is and how they're adding value to the society. So you are seeing always with the society, with tackling different issues, developing different programs. One of the programs that you are involved in, Youth Leadership Academy. So normally what we think is an internship program is only available in colleges. But I think this program is available for school-going children. And it's a great opportunity for all the school-going children in San Joaquin County to at least get involved and see their mentors, see these departments firsthand, how their functioning is. So just please share with us how this thought process came to develop such a robust and such a wonderful program, Youth Leadership Academy, and how a student can enroll in it and what they should expect to get out from this course.
Wonderful. Thank you. And before we jump into that, I just want to thank you and your listeners. You guys are out there every weekend. You feed anybody that walks in the door. You give groceries away for us. You did testing for us, shots, you name it. Anything that the community needs, you guys have been out there. So let me please thank you for your leadership. Whatever, it's just amazing. Whatever the need is in the community, that minute, you're out there with answers and solutions. So please thank you and your listeners for all that you do for our community. And so the Youth Leadership Academy started over 20 years ago with Judge Flavianos, Judge Murray, myself, and some others. Terry Costa, a wonderful lady who's done an incredible job with the program. And over the years, this past year, we had our biggest class, 50 plus students from every high school in the county. So you can be an entering freshman up to an exiting senior. And I've taken 100 kids off the street because I couldn't go home at night knowing they were out there and I was going to go home. So I've put them up in hotels, motels, along with my partners out there that are just amazing and volunteers. And, we work to make sure that they're safe, and then we get them into housing and maybe their parents into recovery, mental health, whatever the case may be. Because I believe in this community, and I owe them a tremendous debt for the kindness that they've shown me throughout my life.
Well, thank you so much, Tori. Just hearing all this information and all your passion, I can hear from your voice. And I just wanted to let the audience know, or whoever will be listening to this podcast later on, that she's somebody who cares about this community and part of this community. And she's been serving for the community, if you look at it as a public servant. So next time, I believe in July, that's where the first primary election is going to be.
June 7th.
Right.
Yeah.
June 7th. So think about this voice, think about her passion, and make an educational decision to vote at that point. So it's all about understanding and learning and hearing from each other that what's the best for our community. So thank you so much, Tori, for giving your such a great time to us. And I wanted to let the audience know we have some technical issue this evening. We couldn't accommodate to be on air by 5:30, but she was so nice and humble that she's like, no problem. Whenever your application is fixed, we'll go on air. So thank you so much for being accommodating to us. Thank you.
No problem. And thank you. And I just would, I'm so grateful for what you guys are doing, this community service. You're educating and empowering people with truth, knowledge, and facts. And from there, you make an informed decision. And I think it's just wonderful because you guys are highlighting the incredible community and the incredible work that goes on every day. But I want to thank you guys as well. And also to your listeners, please call anytime if you have a question or a concern. You can call me directly. Everybody has my cell phone. You can also go to our website where we have our data and you can look. Our goal, hopefully in 23, is to do a data dashboard every day. So you can see how many cases came into my office, how many we handled, and where we're going with them. We break down race, neighborhood, gender, relationship, you name it. It's a 40, 50 page document in here. First time ever in the history of the district attorney's office that we've had data. And from there, that drives our decision and also allows us to tell you what we're doing. So you're getting your money's worth. And I guarantee you, those 300 people work so hard in my office. I'm truly grateful to them. They're just my heroes, but so many other people in the community as well. So we want to thank, on behalf of everybody in the San Joaquin County District Attorney's Office, we want to thank this community for believing in us and working with us to find solutions. We don't have time for complaints. We only have time to find solutions. So if you want to complain and be negative and whine, build your own website. But if you want to get something done, build a better community and find solutions, then give us a call. We'll be here to work with you.
So Tori, for our listeners, if they want to remember you, who Tori is, briefly.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so very much for this opportunity. It was amazing. And let us know if you want us to come back and we can talk about identity theft. We're seeing a lot of it. It's tax season. Want to remind everybody the IRS does not call you. So if you get a phone call from the IRS, hang up. It is a fraudulent call because it's tax season. But we can come back in the next couple of weeks if you guys wouldn't mind, and we'll talk about all kinds of, identity theft, elder abuse, things like this that we're seeing in the community. We want to educate and empower people to make sure that they don't become victims of it.
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.